A single stone can weigh more than a fighter jet. How did ancient people move these mountains of rock across continents and up mountainsides without modern machines? By the end of this journey, you will see the entire timeline of human history in a completely new way. We are visiting 20 megalithic sites where the rules of physics and engineering seem to have been rewritten by forgotten hands. From a 1,000-ton block abandoned in a Lebanese quarry to perfect stone spheres hidden in Costa jungles, these puzzles defy our understanding of ancient transport. This is a mystery of lost knowledge and silent ambition carved in stone. What do you believe is possible when a community shares a single, impossible dream? A foundation of impossible weight lies beneath the feet of history. In the Valley of Lebanon, the grand columns of the Roman Temple of Jupiter stand upon a platform of staggering ambition. This is the 3 limestone blocks, each estimated to weigh over 800 tons, fitted together with a precision that defies their monstrous. Their story, however, begins almost a full kilometer away in a nearby quarry. There, a 4th block named the Stone of the Pregnant Woman rests where it was carved, a solitary titan weighing 1,000 tons. To visualize that, picture a fully loaded commercial airliner, then multiply its weight by 5. This is the raw material of the mystery. The challenge is not just the carving, which is a feat of immense patience, but the journey. How do you move a small mountain across uneven ground, up a gentle slope, and into a perfect position? Theories from experts like engineer Jean-Pierre Adam involve complex systems of ropes, wooden rollers, and earthen ramps, a symphony of coordination requiring hundreds of workers for months. Yet even these detailed models struggle to explain the practical reality of maneuvering such an inert mass without catastrophic failure. The Romans are credited with the temple above, but the origin of these foundation stones is shrouded in deeper time, possibly the work of a far older culture co-opted by later builders. This forces a humbling question. We often picture ancient transport as simple carts and oxen, but this suggests a lost science of mass and momentum. A collective understanding of physics applied on a scale we can scarcely replicate without modern machinery. It is a silent testament to what a unified society, driven by a shared vision, could achieve. And if this is merely the foundation, what other heights of impossibility did they reach across an ocean of isolation? Another civilization answered the stone's call with haunting ambition. Easter Island, is a speck of land over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest continent, a place where resources were always finite and every human effort carried immense cost. Yet here the people created those brooding giants with their solemn gazes fixed inland. Carved from compressed volcanic ash at the quarry of, these figures were not meant to stay where they were born. The largest of them, named El, lies unfinished and weighs an estimated 80 tons, a colossal entity that needed to travel up to 18 kilometers across hills and rough terrain to its ceremonial platform. For a long time, this was the ultimate mystery of impossible transport, a puzzle that seemed to demand superhuman effort from a small, isolated community. The most compelling modern theory, tested by archaeologists like Terry Hunt and Carl, suggests the statues did not just slide or roll, they may have walked. Using a system of ropes, teams could have rocked the monoliths from side to side, pivoting them forward in a slow, deliberate shuffle. This method turns the transport into a rhythmic, communal dance, a profound cultural act that wove the society itself together in the shared task of moving their ancestors. Yet even this elegant solution leaves practical questions echoing. Coordinating such an operation for dozens of multi-ton statues, without shattering the delicate stone, represents a logistical masterpiece of communication and patience. It challenges the very notion of limitation, showing us that a society's greatest achievements are not always measured in surplus resources, but in unified purpose. They are not failures of a collapsed culture, but breathtaking successes of a people who mastered their world against all odds. From this remote island where giants learned to walk, we find a different kind of guidance written in the stones of an Egyptian desert. The desert holds memory in its stones. Long before the pharaohs raised their pyramids, a different kind of monument rose from the sands of the Nubian desert. At Playa, around 7,500 years ago, a community of cattle herders arranged a collection of stones into circles and precise alignments. The individual megaliths are not massive by the standards we have seen, perhaps a few tons each, but their story is one of profound intention. They were gathered from outcrops over a kilometer away and brought to this specific, empty basin, a hyperarid landscape that even then was a challenging place to live. This is the true puzzle. We are not looking at the work of a centralized state with armies of laborers. This was a pastoral society, likely seasonal visitors to the playa when water was present. Their survival depended on mobility and careful resource management, yet they chose to invest immense communal effort in moving these heavy stones across the desert. Why would they do it? The answer appears written in the sky above them. Researchers like astrophysicist Thomas have studied the alignments, finding that the stones correspond to the positions of key stars, including those in the belt of Orion, and even mark the summer solstice. This was not random art. It was a functional, stone calendar and ceremonial site, an early observatory that tied their rituals to the cycles of the heavens, which in turn dictated the coming of rains and the movement of their herds. Their motivation was survival itself, encoded in celestial knowledge. This site defies a major assumption that monumental transport requires complex state machinery. Here, it required something even more powerful, a shared belief system so vital it compelled a scattered community to unite and literally drag their understanding of the cosmos into the heart of the desert. It shows us that the drive to build, to mark time, and to seek meaning in the stars is a human constant, one that can move stones long before it builds empires. From this ancient stellar map, we journey to a structure that seems to capture the very essence of celestial order in stone. The circle on the Salisbury Plain is a question written in stone. Stonehenge, with its iconic sarsen, represents a puzzle of both mass and distance. The largest of these sarsen stones weigh around 50 tons, and they were dragged over 30 kilometers from the Marlborough Downs. Modern experiments, like one led by archaeologist Mark in the 1990s, showed that moving such a weight was possible with a team of around 200 people using a wooden sledge on a track of greased logs. It was a monumental, yet theoretically understandable, feat of Neolithic logistics. But the deeper mystery lies with the smaller stones, the so-called bluestones. Their geological fingerprint points to a source over 250 kilometers away in the hills of Wales. This changes everything. Transporting 80 or so stones, each weighing up to 4 tons, across such a vast and rugged landscape, involving rivers, steep slopes, and varied terrain, transcends simple necessity. The sheer effort invested suggests these particular stones held a significance we can no longer fully hear. Was this a sacred pilgrimage, where the journey itself was a ritual? Did these rocks possess unique properties, perhaps a distinctive ring when struck, linking them to spiritual or ceremonial practices? Their epic voyage implies a powerful cultural narrative, a story so important it compelled generations to undertake this incredible task. Stonehenge, therefore, is not just an astronomical calendar of stunning precision. It is a testament to a complex, connected Neolithic Britain, capable of organizing multi-generational projects that blended brute force with refined purpose. It challenges us to see these builders not as primitive, but as people driven by a sophisticated worldview, one worth moving mountains, or at least very large stones, to express. From this ordered circle born of distant quarries, we ascend to a fortress where the stones themselves seem to have melted together. High above the ancient Inca capital, the fortress presents a paradox of power and precision. Its zigzagging walls are assembled from limestone blocks, so enormous they seem to belong to the mountain itself, with the largest exceeding 120 tons. These stones began their life in a quarry several kilometers distant, a journey that required moving them up steep inclines toward the sky. Consider the constraints. The Inca civilization possessed no wheels for carts, no strong draft animals like oxen, and their hardest tools were made of bronze, a metal too soft to cut the granite and limestone they shaped. The conventional explanation involves an army of laborers, using ropes, wooden rollers, and earthen ramps to inch each block forward through sheer collective force. This system, known as was a form of communal labor service that wove the entire society into the fabric of construction. Yet the true marvel is not just the movement, but what happened after the journey ended. Each multi-ton block was then painstakingly dressed and fitted to its neighbors, with a joint so flawless that even today, you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. This precision after such a rough journey defies simple logic. It suggests a profound, almost intuitive understanding of stone, as if the masons could see the hidden geometry within each rock and knew exactly how it would marry to the next. The walls were not built, they were woven, with each irregular block locked into a three-dimensional puzzle that has withstood centuries of earthquakes. This transforms the story from one of brute transport to one of sublime artistry. The journey brought the mass, but the mind and the hand performed the miracle. It demonstrates that for these builders, the final fitting was a sacred act of unification, turning separate stones into a single, unshakable entity. From these walls where stone learned to embrace stone, we find a city where the rock appears to have been softened by some forgotten craft. The mountains themselves were reshaped by a will of granite. High in the sacred valley of Peru, the fortress temple commands a steep slope with an air of defiant mastery. Its most striking feature is the Temple of the Sun, a wall of colossal red granite blocks, some weighing 50 tons, that seem to pulse with a warm, rosy hue against the Andes. The origin of these stones is a story written in the landscape itself. They were from a mountainside on the opposite side of the valley, a distance of several kilometers that included a formidable list of obstacles. Traversing rough terrain, crossing the rushing river, and finally being hauled up the steep incline to the building site. This was not a simple drag, it was a monumental obstacle course. To solve it, Inca engineers likely became landscape artists. One prevailing theory suggests they may have diverted the river itself, creating temporary canals to float the stones part of the way on reed boats, harnessing the water's power to do the work of thousands. For the final, brutal ascent, they would have constructed massive earthen ramps, a temporary mountain built to conquer a permanent one. The journey, however, was only half the miracle. These gargantuan blocks were not finished when they arrived. The evidence is in the stone. They feature polygonal masonry, a jigsaw puzzle of multi-angled faces that interlock with neighboring blocks with uncanny, seismic-proof precision. This tells us the stones were roughly shaped at the quarry to reduce transport weight, and then their final, perfect facets were painstakingly carved in, after the Herculean effort of getting them there. This reveals a mind-boggling level of foresight and planning. The architects had to visualize the final, perfect joint between two unmoved stones, calculate how much material to leave for the final dressing, and coordinate the entire process across years and countless laborers. Is more than a fortress. It is an adaptive engineering, proving that for the Inca, the challenge of the journey was inseparably linked to the vision of the destination. From these mountains where stones learned to flow like water, we descend to a steamy jungle where they took the form of perfect spheres. Perfect spheres lie hidden in the earth, as if a giant's marbles were left behind in the jungle. The spheres of Costa are objects of serene, geometric mystery, carved from hard volcanic rock like gabbro into forms of stunning precision. Some are over 2 meters across and weigh 16 tons, a mass equivalent to 2 large elephants, yet their surfaces can be so smooth and round that modern measurements reveal minimal imperfections. Their creation by pre-Columbian cultures, likely between 600 and 1500 years ago, is a feat of patience and skill achieved without metal tools. Using stone hammers and abrasives to gradually peel the world away until only the perfect sphere remained. But the puzzle deepens when you ask how they traveled. These spheres are not found in the mountain quarries where they were born. They are discovered scattered in the lowland jungles and river deltas, sometimes dozens of kilometers from their source. How do you move a 16-ton stone ball through dense, uneven rainforest without it becoming lodged in the mud or losing its flawless shape? The most plausible theories involve a combination of ingenious methods. They might have been rolled on log tracks, a precarious process requiring constant adjustment to maintain course. Or perhaps they were floated on rafts down rivers during the rainy season, using the water itself as a highway. Each method implies not just technical understanding, but a sustained communal commitment. Moving a single sphere would be a major undertaking, yet hundreds exist. This suggests their value was immense, transcending mere decoration. Their purpose is still debated by archaeologists, with ideas ranging from astronomical markers and symbols of power to representations of celestial bodies. Their very form, a shape with no beginning and no end, may have held profound spiritual meaning, signifying unity, perfection, or the cosmos itself. The immense effort of their transport confirms one thing, that these were not casual objects. They were central to the worldview of the people who made them, a physical manifestation of an ideal so important it was worth the labor of generations. This unique form of megalith, a monument shaped not for stacking but for contemplation, leads us to a different kind of sacred site, where massive stones were moved not for the sky, but for the earth. Creating a final resting place for the departed, the mountains hold silent houses for the departed. Across the highlands of the Caucasus, stretching from Russia into Georgia, thousands of dolmens stand as solemn sentinels. These are not simple piles of rock, but precise stone tombs constructed from colossal slabs, each one a feat of transport that grows more perplexing the closer you look. Built during the Bronze Age, over 5,000 years ago, a typical dolmen consists of 4 massive side stones supporting a single, even larger capstone, all carefully fitted together without mortar. The capstones alone can weigh over 20 tons, the equivalent of 3 large elephants, and they were often crowned high on ridges or secluded hilltops, places with commanding views but difficult access. This is the core of the mystery. The source quarries for these stones were often in river valleys far below, meaning the builders faced the staggering task of moving multi-ton slabs uphill, across broken, forested terrain that would have made rolling or straightforward dragging nearly impossible over long distances. How did they accomplish this ascent? Some researchers, like archaeologist Vladimir, have proposed ingenious seasonal solutions. They might have waited for winter, dragging the stones over paths of packed snow and ice, using the slick surface to reduce friction. Others suggest a system of wooden levers and fulcrums, a painstaking, inch-by-inch process of pivoting each slab up the slope, a maneuver requiring immense coordination and patience. The scale of the phenomenon deepens the puzzle. These are not isolated monuments, but thousands of them spread across a vast region, indicating a shared cultural tradition with a powerful, unifying purpose. Each portal hole cut into the front slab, often aligned with solstice sunrises or other celestial events, suggests these were more than tombs, they were gateways, linking the community with the cycles of the cosmos and the memory of their ancestors. The immense logistical effort, repeated over generations across mountains and valleys, speaks to a belief system so profound it could move mountains, or at least their stones, to the sky. It reminds us that the greatest feats of ancient engineering were often in service of the sacred, a physical expression of care and continuity that transcended a single lifetime. From these highland tombs built for eternity, we descend to a city where the stonework was designed to defy conquest itself. The gateway itself is a statement of power carved in stone. At the ancient citadel of Mycenae, the imposing Lion Gate stands as the sole surviving monumental sculpture from the Greek Bronze Age, a threshold guarded by two massive felines. But the true engineering marvel is not the iconic relief carving, but the stone that makes it possible. The lintel, that massive horizontal block spanning the entrance, is a single piece of conglomerate stone estimated to weigh 20 tons. To appreciate the challenge, picture the task not just of moving this slab, but of lifting it. After being transported from a quarry, this dead weight had to be raised over 6 meters into the air, then positioned with absolute precision to sit perfectly atop the two towering side posts, forming the stable foundation for the famous triangular relief above it. This was not a simple matter of dragging. The Mycenaean builders likely employed a technology of temporary landscapes. They would have constructed a massive earthen ramp against the gateway, a sloping hill of dirt and rubble built solely for this purpose. Using ropes, wooden rollers, and a system of levers and cribbing, a wooden framework to support the stone incrementally, they would have inched the lintel upward. A grueling process of coordination where a single slip could mean catastrophe. The surrounding cyclopean walls, made of irregular multi-ton blocks fitted together, showcase a different kind of strength, but the lintel represents a specific, confident act of structural engineering. It shows a society that had mastered the physics of leverage and counterbalance, likely drawing on knowledge exchanged across the Aegean with cultures like the Minoans. This gateway, therefore, is more than an entrance, it is a microcosm. It encapsulates the entire Mycenaean ambition, their ability to conceive of a monumental symbol and possess the unwavering technical skill to hoist it into place, declaring their might for all who would approach. From this citadel, where a 20-ton stone was lifted to the sky, we journey to an island where the stones themselves seem to possess a life of their own. Sandstone giants guard a silent hilltop in Sardinia. The giants carved by the enigmatic civilization over 3,000 years ago, stand as tall as 2.5 meters. Their geometric faces and stylized features staring blankly across the Mediterranean landscape. While their individual weight, perhaps a few tons each, is less than the colossal, their story presents a different kind of transport puzzle. These statues were not erected where they were found. They were carefully moved from their sandstone quarries to a sacred necropolis, a hilltop cemetery, involving a deliberate journey across the rugged Sardinian terrain. The people are renowned for their towering, conical stone fortresses called complex feats of dry stone masonry that dot the island. Yet the statue project reveals another layer of their society, a specialized ritual craft dedicated to honoring the departed. Moving these multi-ton blocks of relatively soft sandstone without fracturing their intricate details would have required more than brute force. It demanded a gentle, controlled process. Researchers suggest methods like oxen-drawn wooden sledges moving along prepared tracks of logs or packed earth, a slow parade of reverence. This logistical effort, repeated for dozens of statues, implies a highly organized social structure with designated craftsmen and ritual specialists. A side of life not fully captured by their defensive towers alone. The giants add a crucial Mediterranean voice to our global chorus of stone movers, proving that the impulse to carve and transport monumental art was not confined to famous empires, but flourished in unique island cultures with their own profound mysteries. Their silent vigil reminds us that every moved stone is a chapter in a larger story of belief, a story we are still learning to read. From this island of sandstone sentinels, our journey plunges into the deep jungles of Central America, where an entire city was shaped from a living mountain. A ruler's face stares from the stone, an unblinking portrait of authority carved from a mountain. In the humid lowlands of ancient Mexico, the Olmec civilization created one of the most iconic megalithic puzzles, the colossal heads. Each one is a single, monumental block of volcanic basalt, some weighing 50 tons, and standing over 3 meters tall, shaped with remarkable skill to depict the distinct features of an individual. Likely a powerful ruler, their creation is a marvel, but their journey is the true enigma. The stone for these giants came from the mountains, a source separated from the ceremonial centers of San and La Venta by a formidable 150 kilometers of dense tropical forest, winding rivers, and vast, muddy swamps. Moving a 50-ton block of basalt across such terrain seems an almost cartoonish impossibility if you picture carts or dragging. The Olmec, however, looked to the water. The most compelling theory, supported by archaeological finds of possible artificial canals at La Venta, suggests they became masters of seasonal hydrology. They likely waited for the rainy season, when rivers swelled and flooded the lowlands, creating a temporary network of liquid highways. Using enormous rafts or barges made from local timber, they could have floated these titanic boulders for much of the journey, letting the current and controlled manpower do the work that sheer pulling could not. This required a deep, generational understanding of their environment, predicting flood patterns and meticulously planning the logistics of a multi-week aquatic procession. The immense investment, repeated for at least 17 known heads, tells us everything about Olmec society. This was not merely art, it was a profound statement of concentrated power. By commissioning, carving, and transporting these permanent stone portraits, a ruler was literally anchoring his legacy into the landscape, demonstrating a command over both nature and people that was divinely sanctioned. It showcases a brilliant, water-based solution to a megalithic challenge, proving that long before the wheel arrived in the Americas, ambition had already learned to sail. From these river-borne portraits of power, we arrive at a city where the stones achieved a state of perfect, impossible balance. The stonework of achieves a state of impossible equilibrium. High on the windswept Altiplano of Bolivia, at a breathtaking altitude of 3,800 meters, the pre-Inca civilization of built with a confidence that seems to mock the very air itself. The platform and the iconic Gateway of the Sun are assembled from andesite and sandstone blocks of staggering mass, some exceeding 100 tons. Their journey began in quarries many kilometers distant across the flat but punishing high plains. While the use of llama-hide ropes and coordinated teams of laborers provides a basic framework for understanding the transport, the environment itself adds a profound layer of difficulty. At this altitude, the air holds only a fraction of the oxygen found at sea level. Every physical act, from a single step to the heave of a rope, becomes an exercise in profound exhaustion. This was not just a logistical puzzle, it was a physiological one. The builders were not merely moving stone, they were doing so while their bodies fought for every breath, turning the project into a monumental testament to human endurance and adaptation. Yet the true marvel comes after the journey. These gargantuan blocks were not simply stacked, they were shaped with a geometric precision that feels almost modern. Intricate channels, perfect right angles, and complex interlocking joints were carved into the hard stone, often after transport, suggesting an almost supernatural skill with simple bronze and stone tools. Therefore, presents a dual mystery. It asks how a society, working at the very limits of human physical capacity, could marshal the sustained energy to move mountains of rock, and then apply such delicate, exacting artistry to their final form. The answer lies not in a single technology, but in a culture that viewed the alignment of stone, earth, and sky as a sacred duty worth the collective breath of generations. From this high plain where builders conquered the thin air, we descend into a valley where the stones appear to have been placed by a gentle, giant hand. Granite can sing. Within the sprawling ruins of the former capital of the mighty empire, the temple complex holds a stone marvel that seems to defy its own material. Here, slender pillars carved from solid granite produce distinct musical notes when tapped, a testament to an almost supernatural understanding of resonance and stonework. The famous stone chariot standing in the courtyard is a monolithic sculpture, but the greater engineering symphony played out across the entire city is a landscape built from granite, an exceptionally hard and dense rock that resists shaping. To construct its towering, expansive, and intricate colonnades, builders sourced countless massive slabs from local quarries. The mystery lies in the logistics of moving these multi-ton blocks across the rocky Deccan Plateau. While not a single, impossible monolith like the stone of the pregnant woman, the collective scale is what stuns the mind. How did they manage it? The builders mastered a technique of splitting granite along its natural grain using wet wooden wedges, a method that required precise knowledge of the stone's hidden weaknesses. Once freed, these colossal blocks were likely loaded onto massive wooden carts, their axles reinforced against the tremendous weight and pulled by teams of elephants along specially prepared roads. This was not haphazard labor, it was a state-run enterprise of breathtaking efficiency. The empire maintained quarries, transportation corridors, and skilled artisan guilds, all synchronized like parts of a great machine. The scale implies a logistical network that rivaled any in the medieval world, moving millions of tons of stone to create a city that awed travelers from across the globe. Reminds us that the age of megalithic ambition did not end with the ancients. It evolved, finding new expression in the empires of the more recent past. Their mastery over granite proves that human ingenuity, when channeled through organized society, could transform even the most stubborn material into a symphony of stone. From this orchestrated city of empire, we voyage to a remote island where the stones whisper of a culture that arrived from across the sea. The ocean itself became a road for moving monuments. Scattered across the islands of Guam, Rota, and in the western Pacific, the latte stones of the ancient Chamorro people stand as a unique architectural signature. Each set consists of a vertical pillar, or capped by a hemispherical stone, or creating a structure that resembles a giant stone T, while a single capstone might weigh only 2 or 3 tons. The collective effort tells a deeper story. These stones of coral limestone or basalt were from coastal cliffs or inland sources, then moved to village sites. A journey that could involve traversing jagged karst landscapes, or even being floated across shallow lagoons on rafts. For a small, isolated society with no metal tools and no beasts of burden larger than themselves, this was no small undertaking. It required a communal investment of time and energy that could have been spent on more immediate survival tasks. Yet, for centuries, they chose to build this way. This persistence reveals a profound truth. The latte stones were more than just practical foundations that lifted houses above the damp ground. They were the bedrock of cultural identity. Their distinctive shape anchored the community, both physically and spiritually, to their ancestors and their place in the vast Pacific. In a world defined by the sea, where resources were limited and isolation was a constant fact of life, the Chamorro people invested their greatest labor not in walls for defense, but in these elegant stone supports for their homes. It challenges our modern idea of necessity, showing that what a community considers essential for survival often includes the symbols that remind them who they are. From these Pacific pillars that tame the shoreline, we find a culture that chose to move mountains of stone to honor the very earth they lived on. The mountain itself became the temple. And in India, the temple stands not as a structure assembled stone by stone, but as a colossal sculpture revealed by subtraction. 8th-century artisans did not build upward, they carved downward, vertically excavating a single, massive basaltic cliff to create a freestanding complex of halls, pillars, and shrines dedicated to Lord Shiva. This process effectively moved over 200,000 tons of solid rock, a volume greater than the mass of many of the individual megaliths we have discussed. The logistical puzzle here is inverted. It is not about where the building materials came from, but where they all went. Removing that much stone without explosives or powered machinery was a feat of sustained, organized removal. Imagine the scene, not of construction, but of controlled deconstruction. Teams of workers, using iron chisels and hammers, would have painstakingly cut the rock from the top of the cliff face downward, following a master plan laid out on the living stone. The debris, thousands upon thousands of tons of it, had to be cleared away continuously. This required a meticulously orchestrated operation of ramps, ropes, baskets, and carts, a constant flow of material moving away from the site to designated dumping areas, likely in nearby ravines. The scale of planning is staggering, a multi-generational project that demanded not just artistic vision, but the managerial genius of a vast, coordinated workforce. Turns the concept of megalithic ambition inside out. It represents a civilization so confident in its command of mass and labor that it chose to create by removal, to reveal the sacred form they believed was already sleeping within the mountain. It is architecture as an act of faith, where every hammer strike was a step toward revealing a divine abode. This monumental act of subtraction leads us to a site where the stones were placed not just on the earth, but in precise alignment with the heavens above. The horizon is not a limit, but a canvas for celestial geometry. On the windswept coast of Brittany, the Karnak Alignments unfold like a vast stone army frozen in silent procession. Over 3,000 standing stones, or menhirs, march in parallel rows across 4 kilometers of open landscape, an undertaking where the true scale is not found in any single block, but in their breathtaking multiplicity. While most stones weigh under 50 tons, sourced from local granite outcrops, the mystery multiplies with each one. Imagine the cumulative effort, not of moving one mountain, but of moving a small hill piece by deliberate piece over centuries. The transport method itself, likely involving wooden sledges, rollers, and teams of people, is comprehensible for a single stone. The profound puzzle is the sustained will to repeat this act thousands of times, across generations, in a pattern of such precise alignment. This was not a sudden construction project. It was a cultural tradition woven into the fabric of society itself, a ritual enacted in stone. The purpose behind this immense investment of labor remains one of archaeology's great debates. Were these rows a colossal astronomical calendar, their lines pointing to solstice sunrises or lunar standstills? Or were they a territorial marker, a statement of identity and control over the landscape, visible for miles? Perhaps they served a ceremonial function, guiding processions for the living or creating a pathway for the spirits of those who had passed. The stones do not speak, but their silent, ordered presence shouts of a community with a unified, long-term vision. Carnac teaches us that megalithic ambition is not always measured in single, impossible weights, but sometimes in patient, persistent repetition. It is a monument to the power of cumulative action, where the coordinated effort of countless hands, over vast stretches of time, can reshape the very face of the earth into a question for the ages. This relentless geometric order finds a different expression across the sea, where an entire civilization used precise angles not just to mark the land, but to defy the crushing weight of the earth itself. The timeline of human achievement was shattered by a single hilltop in southeastern Turkey. Is not a city or a fortress, but a series of circular stone sanctuaries built over 11,000 years ago, a staggering 7 before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its architects were not farmers or kings, but nomadic hunter-gatherers, people whose survival depended on following herds of wild animals and foraging for seasonal plants. This fact alone upends everything we thought we knew. These communities lived hand-to-mouth, with no permanent homes, no domesticated animals to pull loads, and only stone tools at their disposal. Yet they chose to undertake a project of breathtaking ambition. Quarrying, shaping, and erecting massive limestone pillars, some standing 5 meters tall and weighing 20 tons, arranging them into precise rings and adorning them with intricate carvings of animals. The transport distance was relatively short, perhaps only a few hundred meters from the local quarry, but the challenge was monumental. Moving a 20-ton pillar without wheels, without draft animals, and without a settled population to draw from for labor required something extraordinary. It demanded the temporary gathering of scattered bands, a seasonal convergence of people who would normally be competing for resources, united by a shared purpose far greater than daily survival. The motivation was almost certainly spiritual or social, a powerful ritual impulse that compelled them to invest their scarce energy and time in building not for shelter, but for ceremony. Suggests a revolutionary idea that the human urge to create monumental sacred spaces may have been the catalyst that brought people together permanently. The need to build and maintain these temples could have encouraged the first experiments with cultivating wild grains nearby to feed the builders, planting the very seeds of agriculture and settled life. This site does not just defy our understanding of ancient transport, it defies the foundational story of civilization itself, proposing that belief and collective ritual came first, and everything else followed. From this dawn of monumentality that rewrites our origins, we leap forward to a medieval mystery where the stones seem to defy a different kind of logic entirely. Granite faces gaze from the jungle floor, their expressions worn smooth by centuries of rain. Deep in the valley of central Sulawesi, Indonesia, a collection of enigmatic stone figures and massive jars rests in quiet isolation. Known locally as, these megaliths are carved from solid granite, with some of the large jars weighing several tons. They are not found in a neat, ceremonial row, but scattered across a remote and difficult landscape of dense rainforest, rolling hills, and winding rivers. The sheer inaccessibility of the valley today frames the core of the mystery, for it was almost certainly even more challenging centuries or ago when these objects were placed. How did the ancient peoples of Sulawesi, with only stone and wooden tools at their disposal, transport these heavy granite blocks from their quarries to these specific, secluded spots? The terrain itself argues against simple answers. Moving a multi-ton stone jar through thick jungle undergrowth, across uneven ground, and potentially over waterways would have been a monumental logistical task, requiring not just manpower but a sophisticated system of pathways, ropes, and possibly even watercraft. The puzzle is deepened by the silence that surrounds them. Unlike the Inca or the Egyptians, the creators of the valley megaliths left no written records, no grand city nearby to provide context. Their age is still debated by researchers, with estimates ranging from a few hundred to several thousand years old, placing them in a vague and distant past. This lack of clear archaeological context means their purpose, and by extension their motivation for such arduous transport, is left almost entirely to speculation. Were they funerary markers, guarding the resting places of important individuals? Could they have been part of ancient agricultural or water rituals, their placement tied to the life-giving rivers? Without more evidence, we are left with the objects themselves and the undeniable fact of their journey. The valley stands as a powerful reminder that for every Stonehenge or Easter Island studied by generations of scholars, there are countless other megalithic puzzles still hidden in the world's remote jungles and valleys, waiting silently for their stories to be understood. From this secluded Southeast Asian valley, where the stones keep their secrets closely, our final journey takes us to a sheer cliff face in the American Southwest, where an entire community built their home in the sky. The mountain itself was the destination, and the journey was a vertical climb. That iconic city in the clouds is often celebrated for its breathtaking location, but its very existence is a masterpiece of megalithic logistics. The Incas did not simply find a beautiful ridge and build upon it, they transformed it, moving massive blocks of granite from quarries both within the sacred complex and from sources far down the steep valley walls. Imagine the task, not of dragging a stone across a flat plain, but of inching a multi-ton block up a narrow, winding mountain path, with a sheer drop on one side and the thin air of the Andes on the other. Every block that forms the Temple of the Sun, or the Royal Tomb, began with that perilous ascent. The methods are familiar in theory: ropes of braided leather and plant fiber, wooden levers, and perhaps temporary earthen ramps built against the steepest slopes. Yet here, the margin for error was essentially zero. A single slipped rope, a lever that splintered, could send weeks of effort and the lives of workers tumbling into the abyss. This required more than strength. It demanded an almost spiritual trust in the system and in one another. The true genius, however, is visible in the walls themselves. After surviving that harrowing journey, these irregular granite blocks were not simply stacked. They were painstakingly shaped, each one uniquely carved to interlock perfectly with its neighbors in that distinctive, earthquake-proof jigsaw pattern. This means the stonemasons had to foresee the final, immaculate fit, even as the raw block was still swaying on a mountainside path. The ritual stone pillar believed to be an astronomical clock, was carved directly from a living bedrock outcrop, anchoring the city's sacred time to the mountain's very bones. Therefore, is the ultimate expression of Inca philosophy. It shows that no place was too remote, no terrain too forbidding, for the human will to create a monument in harmony with the world. It was a statement that their empire and their gods belonged not just in the valleys, but in the realm of the condors. This profound relationship with inaccessible landscapes finds its final, most extreme expression in a place so remote it feels like the edge of the world itself. The desert sands of Arabia hold a vast, silent geometry. In the stark volcanic fields of Saudi Arabia, recent discoveries have rewritten an empty map. Archaeologists using aerial surveys and satellite imagery have identified thousands of ancient stone structures, including enigmatic long rectangles called, and formations dubbed gates. All built from dark basalt blocks. These are not the towering pillars of other sites, but their scale is written in the landscape itself, some walls stretching over 600 meters in length, assembled from stones each weighing several tons. The enigma here is one of context and motive. These monuments were built around 7,000 years ago by Neolithic pastoralists, people who followed herds of sheep and goats across a brutally arid landscape. This was not a land of cities or concentrated power, but of small, mobile groups surviving where permanent water was a distant dream. Yet they chose, repeatedly, to invest their scarce energy in moving these heavy volcanic stones across the rugged, the lava field, to build shapes visible only from above or at a distance. How did they manage it without large, settled populations or beasts of burden? The answer likely lies in seasonal gatherings, a time when scattered bands would converge at a sacred location, turning the act of construction into a binding ritual that reinforced social ties across a vast territory. The stones themselves were not moved miles and miles, but their collective movement, repeated across thousands of sites, represents a monumental investment in something beyond survival. These structures appear to have no defensive or domestic purpose, their layouts suggesting ritual processions or communal ceremonies, perhaps related to ancient pilgrimage or animal offerings. This discovery is profoundly humbling. It expands the map of megalithic culture into a region we once thought devoid of such ambition, proving that the drive to reshape the earth with great stones is not a fluke of specific cultures, but a fundamental human impulse. From the dense jungles of Costa to the high plains of Bolivia, from the remote Pacific islands to these Arabian deserts, we find the same story written in different scripts. People everywhere, when united by a shared belief or a common purpose, achieved the logistically impossible. They moved mountains, not because it was easy, but because it meant something. The stones were never the final goal. They were the physical language of a community speaking to its gods, its ancestors, and its own future. Patterns emerge like whispers from the stones themselves. From the river highways of the Olmec to the snow tracks of the Caucasus, from the earthen ramps of Mycenae to the rhythmic rocking of Easter Island, we see a global toolkit of ingenuity. Water, earth, wood, and rope, these were the fundamental elements, orchestrated through an understanding of physics learned by hands and passed down through generations. The sheer scale of communal effort is the most consistent clue, a truth written into the landscape of every site. Whether it was the labor system of the Inca, the seasonal gatherings at, or the generational commitment at Carnac, these were not projects of slaves under a whip. but of societies united by a shared vision so powerful it could redirect the labor of lifetimes. This points to a second, vital pattern: the role of belief. The stones were moved not for practical shelter, but for temples, tombs, calendars, and portraits of power. The motivation was often spiritual or social, a cultural imperative that transformed backbreaking labor into sacred duty. This intangible force, this collective will, may be the most potent technology of all, one we still recognize but can never fully measure. Yet for all these patterns, a stubborn gap remains between our plausible reconstructions and the silent, finished reality of these monuments. This gap has given rise to more speculative ideas, from tales of lost continents to theories of acoustic levitation, or even intervention from beyond our world. While mainstream archaeology rightly views such claims with deep skepticism, their persistence is telling. They are not really about ancient aliens or forgotten supersciences. They are a symptom of our own awe. They represent a profound human reluctance to accept that the answer might be both astonishingly simple and heartbreakingly complex. Simple in its tools, but complex in its social and psychological dimensions. The truth, as always, likely resides in the middle ground. It was not magic, but a mastery of fundamentals we have since overshadowed with machinery. It was the brilliant application of the inclined plane, the lever, the roller, and the pivot, combined with a patience we can scarcely conceive. A project was not a deadline to meet, but a legacy to build, season by season, lifetime by lifetime. This collective body of work, from the Lebanese quarry to the Arabian desert, delivers a final, humbling lesson. It argues powerfully against a linear view of human history, where capability only marches forward. What we see are distinct peaks of achievement, arising independently across time and space, each a response to a unique environment and belief system. The builders of did not need the wheel, the Olmec did not need the draft animal, and the seafarers of did not need a continent. They found their own paths to the impossible, proving that human ingenuity is not a single rising line on a chart, but a constellation of brilliant flashes, each illuminating what a community can do when it shares a single, monumental dream. These stones form a single, global tapestry of ambition. From the 1,000-ton block in the quarry at Baalbek to the vast geometric patterns newly discovered in the Arabian deserts, the 20 sites we have explored are not isolated oddities. They are connected threads in a much larger story, a story that defies any single, simple explanation. Each one stands as a signpost, pointing toward profound depths of prehistoric and ancient knowledge that we are still, piece by piece, uncovering. To move a megalith was to engage in a fundamental dialogue between humanity and the raw materials of the earth, a triumph of collective will over sheer physical limitation. It was an act of faith in a shared future, carved in the most permanent medium imaginable. Today, that dialogue continues, but with new voices. Researchers are now armed with tools our ancestors could never have conceived. Technologies like LiDAR peer through dense jungle canopies to reveal hidden structures, while geochemical sourcing traces a stone's journey from its birthplace to its final resting place with scientific precision. Each scan, each mineral analysis, offers another potential clue, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Yet, for all our advanced instruments, part of the enduring power of these places lies precisely in the mystery they retain. They remind us that history is not a closed book with all the answers neatly printed in the back. It is an ongoing investigation, a conversation across where we are still learning to ask the right questions. Let these wonders inspire you to look at the ancient world with fresh eyes, to see not primitive struggles, but peaks of ingenuity that still command our respect. What do you believe motivated these communities to achieve the impossible? If you have your own thoughts or theories about these megalithic mysteries, we would love to hear them in the comments below. And if you want to join more journeys into the unexplained, be sure to subscribe.